Hi, welcome to the Pitt Stage's designer roundtable for 7 guitars. I'm here with some awesome folks. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves.
Hi, my name is Karen Gilmer, and I am the director and costume designer for 7 Guitars.
Hello, I'm Kensey. She, her, hers. I am the scenic designer for 7 Guitars.
My name is Krishna. I'm the sound designer for 7 Guitars, he, they.
And I am Victoria. I am the dramaturg for this production, and I go by she, her pronouns. I just want to thank all of you guys for joining us today. We are just going to go ahead and get started talking about our production of 7 Guitars, a historic production for Pitt Stages we're very excited about, and with some stellar design choices. So let me start with this. How do y'all approach your design process for a show like this, a show this big?
I guess I'll start since I'm scenic. In terms of my design process, obviously I start with reading the script first. Then I do a bit of research on the area in which the script notes that the story takes place in. So in this case, Pittsburgh Hill District, 1940s summertime. That's generally kind of the starting point. Then I do my artistic research, and then I roughly start to design some things. And then to try to prevent burnout. Oh, wow. What's happening? Can you hear me?
Yes, Kensey, we can.
I have no clue. That's actually kind of cool looking. I don't know why it's doing that, but I'm just gonna go with it. You know, that's really actually kind of cool. Let me just screenshot that. Damn it, it went away. Okay, this is fine. These things do happen. What was I saying? Oh, and then to prevent burnout, I like to read like different books that are within the same genre of the script, just to kind of get some outside influences and to help me maintain a sense of like enjoyment through my design process. That's how I approach mine.
That's wonderful.
So for me, what's interesting is being a Pittsburgher and being from Pittsburgh. Folks take for granted that I should know some of this stuff, but I don't. And like Kensey, I too had to do research and look at what was happening in Pittsburgh and what was happening in Pittsburgh in the 1940s. And luckily, the Courier was an influential newspaper at the time we had access to. Mm-hmm. So August Wilson says that he's not, a historian, but he sets his characters in historic places. So for me, I had to know what was going on in, let's say, the late 40s, because he played around with the time period, specifically the fight happened in 1946, I want to say, and the play takes place in 1948. But he specifically placed it, did things to make sense in Black America rather than America, if that makes any sense. So our timeline for me was 1945 to 1940 to 1948. So the costumes are based in that time period, but Ruby bringing in hope and sort of the new idea and a second migration. Her costumes are 1952, specifically because that's when which is so costume historian of me, is when the line in women's clothing started to shift into the new look and things like that. So anyway, so I took advantage of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I guess, yeah, I mean, like everyone else, probably my first part of my design process, like reading the script and all that, right? But then the next thing that for me is making a Spotify playlist and getting immersed in this genre, right? I mean, it's mostly like 1930s, 1940s blues music at the time. I also threw in a little bit of jazz and stuff like that. Most of the stuff is time period accurate, like 1930s, 1940s, what you would hear over the radio at that time, right? But there's also some later influences. And something else that I wanted to capture, and something that both me and Karen were focused on, was highlighting especially like female blues artists and their impact on characters and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, so like once I like have a Spotify playlist, right, I'm just like simmering in that, right? And then I like sort of like mix and sort of like match like music with moments, right? And stuff like that. And so that's how I can sort of get my like, sound design process going. And eventually, you have a whole you have a whole QLab file with a bunch of music from the time period. And yeah, and also it gets stuck in your head. Like I've been singing a bunch of old 30s blues songs. They've just been stuck in my head for the last like 3 weeks. And I mean it's like good, right? But yeah, it's still stuck in my head though. But yeah, that's my design process at least.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just say something what's refreshing about working with students in this capacity is Krishna hit the nail on the head. He's listening to music that he otherwise would not have run into had they not been doing this show. And so for me, opening up the next generation's eyes musically, especially to music, like that statement just really warmed my heart. So I just wanted to point that out. And the fact that the music that Krishna specifically picked for the moments he nailed right on the essence of the music within the blues. With the Mojo Work tune, can be taken in so many different ways in that moment. But when we talked about, he hit it. But I love how he played around with the different nuances that some of these songs could take. And I think that to give him credit for a young sound designer, to me, that's something that comes later, but to hit it so early on in a career is just definitely just commendable. And especially
Thank you,
not to be of
Karen.
the culture, is really, if I could say that, really commendable. So thank you.
Yeah, those are really kind words. Yeah, this is like, I don't know if anyone knows, but this is my second time like ever sound designing anything. So it's nice to know that I'm like going in the right direction.
That's awesome. Along that line of what Karen was just pointing out, I do want to say, Kensey, you're a guest designer, right? But I believe you have set designed for us before at Pitt. Is that true? Is that what I heard through the grapevine? I didn't know this, but
Yes, we all have to start somewhere. That's what I'm going to say.
yeah.
I designed She Kills Monsters back in 2019. I think so. I think it was 2019. I don't know. This thing called a pandemic happened, and everything before then just kind of is a blur. But yes, so I designed She Kills Monsters, and then and I was a teaching artist as well. So I was teaching, and then I went to grad school at the University of Arizona, got my MFA, and full circle, Pitt reached out and wanted me to design the show, and this is my first August Wilson. And it's so interesting because this is the first August Wilson that the department is producing. So it's just really interesting to see, how that came full circle for me. But yeah, comparing the two shows, it's like night and day, literally. I'm much more savvy in my area now. And that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Sure. Yeah, but you bring up a great point. Thank you for giving me a little debrief. I was just being a little nosy, but you also bring up a really great point that, you know, a Wilson production is kind of its own entity, right? It's huge. And so I want to propose to all of you guys, you know, like what's challenging about designing for a Wilson production, but what's rewarding? If is there anything that's like also just makes you so jazzed, for lack of a better word, in this moment?
I think for me, one of the larger challenges is August Wilson tends to create stories in practical spaces, like actual, like functioning environments. It's like he's taking a snippet of these different stories and these different lives from around Pittsburgh, and he's putting them together, and you have to create a practical space that represents that. And so with me, I'm more of an artistic kind of abstract scenic designer. And so I do the artsy fartsy thing, and I'm not thinking about a practical building or, you know, practical walking spaces. It's more of, I'm going to put a sculpture on stage and then we figure out how to make it function for, you know, directing and all of that. I think that is the biggest challenge, but that's also very rewarding because that gives me an opportunity to practice making realistic sets like that. So, you know, I'll understand how to design domestic buildings, or, you know, the Hill District in itself is already unique and everything is smushed together and nothing is flat. And there are so many different textures next to each other. And so it's just fun to be able to learn how to make that a practical thing with designing scenery, whereas I approach it in an abstract manner normally. So it's just kind of, you know, it's a challenge, but it's also rewarding. So, yeah.
And I will also add on to that, costume wise, you're looking at and specifically a time period where it's after World War II and fashions was changing, and I bring this up, but women were wearing pants. And so starting to wear pants. And so there was, you know, a lot of pushback against that whole thing, but it was the breakthrough of that. Also, seamed stockings, and that specifically speaks to how actresses move. And we haven't been rehearsing with seam stockings, so it'll be very interesting to see on Tuesday how the seam stockings are definitely going to change how they move, because you have something on your legs, but you have something that you have to hold up, you know. So it'll be very interesting. And here again, when Wilson says he's not, you know, historical, but here we are in 1948. And it is specifically stated that the actress is wearing seam stockings. So, you know, so there's some things historically that you have to pay attention to. And as a costume designer and a director, seam stockings for the costume designer, seam stockings and how the actress is going to move in the seam stockings and a panty girdle. It informs a whole lot, especially in the set that Kensey has created. There's steps, there's chairs, there's lots of levels and up and down. And so we're not used to, you know, wearing that sort of thing. So I just think it's cool that we can, as Kensey said, take a moment in you know, in sort of history and in the Hill District and kind of try to capture it. And so costume wise, that goes with, you know, what would, you know, Louise be wearing? What would they be wearing? But what they're wearing underneath and how that informs how they're moving. Okay, thank you.
And adding to that, Karen, I think it's interesting that you brought that up because Ruby says, I can't be walking up and down these hills in these shoes. And it's funny because Pittsburgh is not flat. And if you're not from here, you don't know that. And so the challenge, there's a whole challenge within fashion in general, with how it's you commute, everybody's commuting constantly throughout the day. And so they're walking up and down these literal hills in heels, heeled shoes and stockings that are difficult to maintain. So I'm looking forward to seeing like how they really implement that bit of fashion history into, the storytelling, because it's just going to make the story that much more authentic. So yeah, and like even when I first moved here, I don't wear the same shoes that I would normally wear here because it's just like my feet gonna hurt, and if I have to walk to the bus stop and stand there. Oh, and I have to walk up a hill to get to. I'm not gonna be wearing no heels. Excuse me. I'm gonna have a pair of Keds on. That's about it. So it's just interesting. It's interesting.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because I specifically, so the next time you see Ruby when she's making flowers, she is in a flatter shoe. So yeah, so I do pay attention to that storytelling because I love shoes. I get that from my grandmother. And so being a costume designer, I when I can tell a good shoe story, I do. And with Ruby specifically, I think so she's been there a few days and she already knows, oh, I gotta get a pair of flat shoes. So next time we see her, she's got flat shoes on. So yes.
That's really cool. I didn't even actually notice. That's like really cool. As someone who I live on top of the hill, like I live in Irvis Hall, so like I walk up and down the hill every single day, and it is an experience every day. Yeah.
Yeah. We're learning the hills. Yeah. A lot of my cute shoes now sit abandoned in the closet, right? For a practical pair of tennis shoes, right? So yeah, that detail. I'm going to be watching everyone's feet now when I watch the show, Karen. I'm like, what did Karen do with shoes now? That's really awesome. Shifting gears just a little bit, I do want to just mention August Wilson's four muses, right? There's Romare Bearden, Amiri Baraka, Jorge Borges, and the blues music, right? The rhythm and blues. And I just wanted to put those in the space because Wilson was so vocal about how much they impacted him as an artist. And I was just wanting to open it up and see if any of Wilson's muses came through to you guys when you were working, if any of them were helpful, any that you drew on particularly.
For me, it's the blues, Borges, and Bearden. No, actually all four, but they come in different ways. So design-wise, for me, it's the blues and Bearden. And directorial, for me, it's Baraki and Borges, because of the poetry that lies within the language, but also the militant that comes through in Headley and Floyd's dialogue. So all four make an appearance in Seven Guitars for me in different ways. But directorially, I can use all four. But as a costume designer, it's Bearden and the blues that really spoke to me.
I mean, for me, obviously the blues, I mean, the music is blues, like the vast majority of the show's music is blues. And so obviously that was a big influence for me. Some other like smaller things that I like also included in my sound design. Ramiro Bearden, a very prolific like collage kind of artist, right? And so definitely with the sound design, there's a lot of there's a really interesting antithesis between like city sounds, like your cars banging, constructional people, people walking, talking, right? And these like country, like barnyardy kind of sounds, right? That are like present throughout, right? Because people are, like migrating and bringing in their country ways into the city, right? And so we sort of get that sort of like collagey kind of feel with that. And also Jorge Borges, really famous South American magical realism writer, right? I think there's definitely some like magical realist elements in the sound design. Some of like the less time period accurate music is some acid jazz from Miles Davis. And that is a very like magical, not like a pretty magical way, but in like a magical and like a almost like voodoo-esque kind of way. And there's also a lot of mention of angels and stuff like that. You're gonna hear some random wing flappings. Listen for those wings. Those are angels. But yeah, so yeah, those are pretty much how like Wilson's muse has affected me in my sound design.
I leaned heavily into Bearden and the blues. The set is absolutely inspired by Ramiro Bearden's Pittsburgh Memories. I loved approaching this in a collage manner with all the textures and kind of these geometric buildings and just different layering and everything like that. The beautiful thing about that particular painting is that it captures the essence of the community of people that this story is talking about perfectly. And so I thought that that would be a great opportunity to kind of represent that authenticity. And with the blues, it's like you have to really sit back and dissect the lyrics because they're all stories, and the blues isn't necessarily a happy thing. So it's just, an expression of all of these adversities that Black folks are dealing with, and tying it up into rhythm and all of these different musical elements. It is an expression of their reality. And so I took that and tied it into the windows and the light boxes that are beyond the set, and all of these kind of very strong colors. And I thought that that could add a dramatic element, and it layers well with the music that is just so beautifully chosen, and the costumes. And so it's kind of like the set, it's a basis, but the collaboration effort is just so spot on. And all of these different areas of design add to that collage effect. So everything is layered, and it's all an effort to help tell this story and represent the community of people that August Wilson was writing about. So I just think that also just ties back into Ramiro Bearden and how he approached his collage artwork, because he understood all of these different layers and he put them together and created this beautiful image. So yeah, those are the two things that I leaned into heavily. I didn't lean too heavily into Amiri Baraka. I felt that if we were doing the next play, hell yeah, we would be looking at Amiri Baraka, because it's just he is just hard in your face, just nationalist approach. He's very radical. And I do think that characters do display a little bit of that here and there, but I didn't want to put that radical, I didn't want to depict a radical world, even though it is a radical world, theoretically. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I love Baraka's work, and I can go on a tyrant about that, right? But it's in doing like dramaturgical research, right? 1948 in the archives, Wilson is so specific about, I thought about putting it in 46, but then no, it needs to be in 48, like so intentional about that exact year and thinking about it like in a socio-historical moment, right? Kensey, how you were saying there's like those moments and those inklings of the characters being rightly frustrated at like the situation of living in America, right? But it hasn't quite hit what historically, whatever that means, we would call like the civil rights movement yet. Like it's right on the cusp of it. And it wouldn't be until July, so a couple months after Floyd's funeral in this play, that like the armed forces would be formally integrated, right? So it's like right at that precipice. And so it's really interesting to hear you like think about like Baraka. I had to pull back a little bit on that because we're not quite there. Anyway, it's just wonderful to hear you guys, like your thought process. I'm just geeking out myself over here. It's really wonderful.
Well, it's also with the research that I've done on, Wilson writing, why he chose 1948 was to see, was to discuss the armed, even before the armed forces were integrated, that there was hope that America would do right by the African American, by the anti-lynching law being passed, by the integration of the armed forces. And so yeah, you're right. It was the beginning of the civil rights movement. It was the ground roots of it. But what's interesting is that two things specifically happened where Black folks thought, hey, things are gonna change. And they didn't. They got worse. Those gentlemen who fought for democracy came back and they were spit on, they were beat up in their uniforms. So yeah, I think Wilson was on to something when you were specifically writing at a time when here we are a few years after certain things happened and here nothing has changed. And somebody asked me the other day, why is this play relevant for today? And it caught me so off guard because I couldn't answer that question. Couldn't at that moment because I hadn't thought about it. But then I thought about it and now I can answer that question. It's relevant today because it hasn't changed. It has not changed. We're still getting beat in the streets, right? We're still inequality in healthcare and in housing and in employment. And it's worse because now the things that were against us that we could, have some sort of, control, we knew was coming. Now it's enforced. January 6th was that was orchestrated. You've seen those people and what they did and how they went into the building and, you know what I mean? And so, it's nothing has changed. That's all I'm saying. I'm sorry. I went a little off there, but let me bring it back. Let me bring it back. So within the world as Wilson created in even though he wasn't historically correct, positionally for the people of color, he was positionally correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
Oh yeah. Yeah, going off of that, I was thinking about the play a lot, right? And I was like thinking about it's crazy how there's so many this play was written in the 1992 or something like that, right? I think that's when it originally premiered on Broadway, at least 1994, general 90s area, right? Yeah. And I remember there's a couple of instances in the play where the characters Floyd and Kane, they talk about getting arrested for basically doing nothing. And it's literally the Xing while blacking, kind of. And I was like, this is 1990s, it's the same thing, And also the underlying, we sort of see the underlying causes of a lot of the structural racism and stuff like that sort of semi recently come to the light of the general public, right? I mean, academics have been talking about this for a while, right? But I feel in the last couple of years, the idea of systemic racism has finally blossomed into a larger public issue. And I feel we sort of see how this sort of came about, right? Especially in the modern times, right? With how this is post World War II, right? We see all like the white people are enjoying the benefits of like the GI Bill, right? And like the Housing Act, right? But we don't see these same like kind of things afforded to Black people, right? We see Black people like and Black veterans like Floyd, right? He came back from the war. His life did not get better. And so we sort of like see all like the seeds for modern, you know, structural racism and stuff like that in the play, which is really cool.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And oh, go ahead, Kensey. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say that's another design element in terms of like the advertisements on the buildings on the proscenium. So I've used Duquesne light, and that for me is it's kind of a metaphor of shedding light on all of the issues, the socio-economic issues, the political issues. And then you have the Mother's Bread grocery store advertisement, which is kind of representing, we're shedding the light on the fact that all of these resources and these promises have been broken. All of these things that were advertised to them to nurture this community has been like pulled away. That's why the ads are kind of like faded and stuff. So it's just like all of these things that we have mentioned, it's just, it is absolutely relevant to today. Even though we're in modern times, we're dealing with a lot of these same issues that seem like they're just getting worse for Black folks, for people of color. And while others are reaping the benefits of a cozier life. And so I think, yeah, so all of these things, they're very strategically, you know, they've been thought about. And I think we're generally just trying to put all of this information, you know, in, you know, this production. But yeah, so yeah. My brain is like, but it's like, yes, we have to talk about these things because it's going to go over some folks' heads. They're just coming to see August Wilson, you know, but it's just like, you have to turn your brain on and be aware if you're going to really receive this story, you know, so.
Absolutely. I love the idea of turning your brain on. Please, like open your eyes, folks. Okay, last question, everyone. And this, I just want to throw it out there in case there's anything you want to shout out of your own work. Like, let's take a moment to celebrate the work that we have done as designers. Are there any aspects that are very exciting or evocative or charming that you think you hope the audience notices? Anything other than Krishna already giving us that insight about the angel wings flapping, which is very cool. You know, are there any other pieces that you're excited and you hope people notice?
Ruby's opening dress was specifically taken from an episode of Perry Mason, the case of the fan dancer's horse. I saw that dress and I immediately, and it's so crazy because I saw it and it spoke to me, it said Ruby. And so I tracked down the video and stopped and was taking pictures on my cell phone of the dress. And what's really interesting about it is at the end of when they're in the court, another woman comes on in the exact same dress. But the difference is for some reason, the one dress has pockets on the side and the other dress has pockets in the front. And personally, I believe it's because the one actress was built a little different and the pockets on the side would have made her look extra hippie. That's just my opinion. I'm saying, but it was a subtle enough detail. Like the dresses were exactly the same, except for that one little point. And so it's funny. So when we were building the dress, I said no pockets because I didn't want to have to make that decision. Because to look at both of the dresses together, I was like, ugh. And the actress could have pulled off either, but it was just easier and I used a gingham so you wouldn't see the pockets anyway. But so that's one of the things. And I just want to say that I learned that going to grad school, that it's possible to get a pattern off a dress that you see on our television show or, you know, and that's actually the first dress that I actually sketched it so that the shop could make the pattern from it. But that's actually the first time I've ever done anything like that outside of grad school. So the first dress I ever did was I saw in a Vogue magazine. But this is the second dress that I've ever, the pattern didn't exist. I even tried to track down the costume designer. Nope.
I think I'm most interested to see if any audience members are familiar with Ramir Bearden, and not even just Ramir Bearden, but urban artists, because it seems like it's trendy, you know, to be familiar with artists who depict city settings. And I just wonder if folks will pick up on, oh, this looks like this painting, or, this was the issue that this artist was creating art about. This is a community of people who this artist was depicting. Like, I just want to know if there is a through line for that, because I know Ramir Bearden because I studied Ramir Bearden, but I just want to know, you know, if somebody in the audience probably has a random like Ramir Bearden in their house because they have the money to buy a Ramir Bearden. But do they know the context behind his collage work in city settings and the people that they represent and the community of people that he is a part of? It's, you know, so that's what I'm most interested in, seeing how folks respond to that and if they'll recognize that. Yeah.
Yeah, some like fun things that I have in the play. Obviously those angel wings, right? There's also randomly a goat. So if you hear a goat, that's like super rare. I don't know why I put that in there, but it's fun. But also a lot of these like blues artists and like a lot of these blues songs, a lot of people don't actually know them by their like original form. A lot of usually like white country singers, typically like or like rock and roll kind of people too. Typically like re-recorded the songs, right? And most people actually know them by their like other Nate, like by like some other artists, right? For example, like there's the Muddy Waters, the really famous Muddy Waters song, right? Most people know it by Elton John's version or stuff like that, right? There's just like so many like versions, like even when I was like first looking at the songs, like the first song that came up wasn't usually actually like the original like blues artist, right? It was like some rock and roll artist, right? Or like some other kind of like random like white artist, right? And it's like kind of crazy how like all these like are like it's just like you like these like forgotten figures who like made our music and it was like stolen from essentially. So yeah, I want to see if like the audience like recognize the music and like seeing if they like heard it before and stuff like that, because there's definitely some moments where I'm like, oh my god, that's like that song right there. And yeah, there's a bunch of fun things sound design wise, which I won't tell you about actually. So you have to go hear it for yourself. But yeah, definitely. Oh my god, tell me if you see a goat, if you hear a goat. But yeah, otherwise, I hope you all enjoy the sound design of the show.
Yeah, if you get a frantic email from me after the show, I heard the goat, don't be surprised, because now it's going to be a challenge, honestly.
I feel like that'll be a fun like Easter egg like hunt or something. Like if you hear the goat, like, and you remember exactly when, then you will get blah blah. Like I feel like that would be a fun way to like provoke like audience participation, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So that's pretty funny. Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's brilliant. I love first of
yeah.
all, it's the goat. It's a goat, you know.
Right.
Somebody's gonna hear it and they're gonna say there are no goats in Pittsburgh. But these are folks who have like literally come from the South. So they're damn sure gonna bring some livestock with them, because these are folks who were likely on the farm and they raise their food and they make a living that way. So
No, I think it's great because when Kensey and I were talking about the set, I was very was insistent that the set be interactive. So there's actual water running, there's plants, there's dirt, there's rocks, there's cooking, there's smoke, haze, blood. And I'm one of those sort of kind of directors that if it's on the set, you have to use it. So the steps are used in different ways. And I was going to say something, just bringing this back around. I forgot where I was going. So I'm going to put a period in that.
All good. Thank you, Karen. All right, friends, we have reached the end of our designer roundtable talk. Thank you all for taking the time off of your dark day to come in and chat with us. Thanks. I'm going to stop the recording because I don't know